Hey, is my audio good?
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Are we doing the same handoff points we did before?
Yeah, I think the slide thing I just updated is, I believe the handoff is at slide 4, which is where we ask people, like, do they drive, do they bike, those kinds of things.
Sure.
All right, just a second.
And Bill, you still want me to take, I'll still do through slide 19 and then hand off to you?
Yeah, if you want to go that far, you can. I had it through, I think I was picking it up at, 17, 18 or 19, somewhere around there. Yeah, I think 19 works. If we, yeah, 19 works.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, that's it.
That's fine.
And if you have to duck earlier, I'll be around. So
No, we're good. I'm on campus. I actually am in real
Nice.
life. This
did
is
it.
new for me.
Are we broadcasting live, Nick?
Yeah, I'm trying, but
Oh, okay.
stupid system. I'm absolutely done with everything.
You are live on the Bike Cave.
I know I'm live on the bike. Here we go. Okay. Not a quick process. All right. Do we want to let folks in?
Let's do it.
Hey, Bill, you're going to share the slides?
Nick's
I
got him.
got it.
Okay, great.
This is in present mode of some
Yep.
sort.
Yeah, that'll work.
All right. Hi, folks. Welcome. Just getting our system set up. Okay. Okay. So, all right. Anna, I'm going to make you co-host so that you can admit folks. Okay, we'll kick it off. It is 12:03, day 3 of Bike to Campus Day. And also I learned on Twitter today, hashtag World Car Free Day. So very funny that we're actually doing this, sharing the road with bicyclist training aimed at drivers. So those of you who are driving a vehicle today or do drive vehicles, thanks for joining. My name is Nick Goodfellow. I'll pass it over to my co-presenters here to introduce themselves.
Bill McShane. We're also work at the University of Pittsburgh in our graduate school of business. I'm a cycle commuter to campus and try and take public transit as much as possible.
My name is Chris Jordan. I work for the University of Pittsburgh as well in the Program Evaluation and Research Unit on Substance Use Disorder, working with stakeholders and coalitions. I began commuter cycling in probably about 2002-ish. Due to COVID reasons and being remote, I haven't been commuting cycling, but I'm look forward to share a lot of experiences that I've had with y'all. I'm sorry,
Great.
we're in Pittsburgh. With Yins, pardon me.
You're right, exactly. Again, so this is the bike-friendly driver training about sharing the road with bicyclists. Both Bill, Chris, and myself recently became league certified cycling instructors, thanks to our Office of Pitt Mobility. So we have a bit more experience with instruction and teaching, same with Anna. Okay. So today we're going to cover a few topics, including sharing the road, as we've discussed. We're going to talk about infrastructure, so common bike infrastructure that you'll see on the road that you may be familiar with, common types of crashes, why those occur and how to avoid them, information about taking the lane, which is when a cyclist is in the middle of a travel lane, why they do that and what you can do. We're going to go over legal parameters. So we'll identify what is legal or what's not based on some scenarios. And then review a bit of what we teach cyclists so that you know what we teach cyclists when we get an opportunity to teach cyclists. And then of course, we'll have space for questions at the end. If you do have questions on Zoom, if you're watching on Zoom or if you're watching the stream on Facebook, you can post them in the comments or in the chat box. We have folks monitoring all of our streams and can relay the questions to our speakers. So feel free to type in a question in the chat if you have one, or just hold it until the end. Okay, so by the end of this presentation, you will sort of understand how to treat bicyclists as drivers of vehicles, which is something that Chris and Bill will review quite often. You'll understand how to avoid bike and car crashes, how to exercise caution at intersections and driveways, understand when and why cyclists take the lane. You'll remember the 4-foot rule when passing. And then, we want to get across that all users of the road want to arrive unharmed. Nobody is getting on the road to get injured. And then the folks on the road are people. And this is really about keeping people safe. People that drive bikes, people that ride bikes, people that drive cars, people that are walking, people in wheelchairs. We really just want to make sure everyone is safe. And that is the point of this training, is to make sure that everybody knows how to keep everybody else safe. So I'm going to hand it off to Bill.
I think I'm taking this part.
Oh,
Go for it, Chris.
Chris is going to take this part.
No, we changed some things on you, Nick, just to make you look confused. It's perfect. No, you fell into our plan. Hey, thank you so much. I apologize. I took this agreement before I knew there was a mandatory scheduling conflict at work. So I'm doing this kind of in my little lunchtime I have here. So yeah, I wanted to build off of what Nick said. The first thing is, and stress some things. Understanding why cyclists do things is really important. And we're going to hopefully touch on that. But the first thing is, when you're driving with bicyclists, to the audience out there, how many of you are driving a car, right? Who are pedestrians? Who's riding a bike? Who's riding a bus? Are you rollerblading? Are you taking other micro mobility like a scooter? Okay. You're all interacting on a shared resource and a limited resource, right? Okay, roadways are a limited resource, and therefore, we can't just simply build bike paths on the sidings everywhere or add more sidewalks. So we have to learn to share the road with each other and respect each other, and as Nick also mentioned, to predict each other and expect what each other are going to do. So next slide, please, Nick. There we go. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to call attention to is, the idea, and also Nick touched on this, we all want to arrive safely. We're all people. And one of the things, take a look at this slide. I always like this campaign because it humanizes these things. In fact, we recently, just to contextualize, we recently went through something that tried to say, individuals who use substances are people and often don't look that way. Well, a lot of the time when people are driving on roads and drivers of cars, look around, they say, there's a cyclist, right? You tend to label people and you don't recognize their humanity. And so this picture just gives you an idea of the fact that why people, who bikes, why do they bike? Out of necessity, for necessity and for the environment, also for health reasons, because they don't need a car most of the time. They live in a community that's very accessible and walkable, and there are things nearby. So that's the point of this, is we're all people, we're trying to share a resource, and the more you understand as a driver what cyclists are doing and other road users are doing, the more likely you are to recognize their humanity. They're just like you. They're trying to get safely to their destination as well. Next slide, Nick. And this comes to this idea of sharing that road, right? A limited resource. We can't build roads everywhere. We shouldn't build roads everywhere. And so we have to figure out ways to coexist on the road. Next slide. So one of the important things to remember as a cyclist is that cyclists are required to follow all the rules of the road. These are laid out very clearly. You can take a look on Bike Pittsburgh to understand these. resources at Pitt as well will direct you to these. It's not difficult to find these. And so, and not only should cyclists obey the law because it is the law, but cyclists and drivers fare best when they're acting and obeying those laws because they become more predictable. And that's a huge theme in cycling, is being predictable, making sure that drivers know what are you about to do, not weaving in and out, etc. So we'll talk about that later as well. But yeah, so cyclists have to, ride on the right side of the road, follow all of the laws of that. And I think we go to our, hold on one sec, I'm a little behind on my slides. And there are a lot of things that exist actually to help cyclists along as well. Bike lanes can't be used by vehicles, okay? Bike lanes are there to improve bike traffic flow and to provide a little bit of separation between those road users. It's an improvement, and buffered lanes are even a little bit better. But again, cyclists follow the rules because, not only because they're the rules and they're the law, but because it keeps you safer. Drivers, keep in mind that, not all cyclists are going to be as skilled. We're going to have some new people out there. So as much as you tend to, as I have done myself as a driver of a vehicle, say, I wish that person wasn't doing that. They're not. Respect the fact that they're experienced cyclists and they're beginner cyclists, and just try to drive in a way that respects, this person may not exactly have internalized all the rules yet and might be struggling a little bit. So next slide. And this brings us to infrastructure. As you bike around, you're going to find that Pittsburgh is sort of a smorgasbord of different types of bike infrastructure, from separated bike paths to on the road bike lanes, sharrows, protected bike paths, areas that there are no bike infrastructure, where basically you must act as the driver of a vehicle in accordance with other vehicles. Okay. But either way, dedicated bike lanes give a place for cyclists. You can't miss them. They're marked with sharrows and typically with a bike symbol in them. In general, for pedestrians who are watching, it's preferred pedestrians not walk in bike lanes, but as long as pedestrians exit bike lanes in time, where a cyclist might be coming along, it usually isn't an issue. And it comes back to some questions that we still have to work around, understanding who needs to be where and when. Next one. So take a look at some of these images down here. So a bike box, okay, we have a bike turn, a left turn, two-stage turn box. Okay, we also have sharrows and a bike signal. So what do these mean, and what do cyclists have to do? First and foremost, when none of these things exist, cyclists need to be driving in direction of travel of vehicles, okay? But as a driver, be aware cyclists are allowed to use any part of your travel lane or cartway, okay? And so you will find people generally will be riding in the sort of slightly to the right side of your lane. They are legally allowed to ride in the middle and also on the left. Just a bit of notice, when I am riding, I use my lane position very intentionally. If I know I'm slower than traffic, I'm usually biking a little bit to the right of the center line. If I'm keeping up with traffic, I'm in the middle of the lane. And if I'm aware that I'm about to turn or there is a dangerous place ahead, I don't want people to pass me, I will go to the left side of the lane, okay? But that's about like me as a cyclist choosing to communicate lane position. Now look at the pictures down here, the bike box. As a driver, you might come up with this and say, oh my gosh, what is this? Why is there this giant hockey stick shaped green thing? And I see drivers often will enter this. And the one thing to keep in mind as a driver, do not enter past the white line. Do not enter the green of the box. That is for cyclists for a variety of reasons, to move up and get in front of stopped traffic. It improves cyclist safety because it allows them, and you might say, hey, why are you jumping in front of me? Don't think of it as jumping in front of you. Oftentimes, especially novice cyclists will be on the right, and they will need to merge with traffic. And that is a conflict point. That's a potential for a problem. Whereas if they get in front of you at an intersection, you can see them very clearly. You say, oh, there they are. They're not hidden in a blind spot to your right. They're in front of you and you can see them. The other thing you take in mind, you're going to come across these in Forbes Avenue and a couple other places. The next one is the two-stage turn box. This is a safety place for cyclists to move ahead and get into a better position to execute a full left-hand turn. Okay, without getting into great visuals, you just have to understand how that, don't have to understand in depth how that works, but just be aware that's what those are for. The other one that you've seen a lot are the shared lane marking, sharrows, okay? A little chevron cap over top of a bicycle symbol. This is to remind motorists that and that bikes will be in this area, okay? They could be anywhere, that you don't need to have sharrows, okay? Sharrows don't permit bikes to use a lane. Sharrows just remind drivers that they'll be there. And in general, though not always the case, as is with the, I think the 40th Street Bridge in Pittsburgh, sharrows are generally located in a place that's a good location for a cyclist to ride and split those sharrows, but not always. Okay, so keep in mind, if a cyclist isn't driving right over top of those sharrows, they're not doing anything wrong. Those sharrows are just to remind motorists that this is usually a high density cyclist area. The bike signal is one thing as a motorist you might want to remember not to use. The bike signal it's a little hard to see that green light is a shape of a bike. It is only for bicycle traffic. Okay, so there's one at Nick, that's Belfield, right? Yeah, Belfield and Forbes, and I think it's the first one to my knowledge, the only one in Pittsburgh, and that could cause some confusion. So just keep that in mind. All right, next slide. And again, other things to be aware of as far as infrastructure. Some of these things are exclusively for bikes, but others can be involved with this. The top left is a protected bike lane. This is buffered with, or I think it's a buffered bike lane, but either way, you notice that there's space between the line. So you have that kind of angled area and you start out, there's the cartway for regular cars, trucks, and motorized vehicles. And then there's a separated buffer space, and then there's the actual bike lane. And you notice there's even a little extra paint buffer to indicate the door zone to stay out of. Roundabouts are new to Pittsburgh. We don't have that many, and so these can be places you may not fully understand. So be a little bit more cautious when you approach them. Again, top right is a protected bike lane where you have vertical bollards. They're just plastic. They don't really hurt vehicles if they were to hit them, but you would notice immediately and be alerted, oh gee, I just hit a giant plastic thing. I notice I'm now near the bike lane, right? Directional paint. Directional paint, you notice there is a person in a cargo bike, okay? Traversing that would be a broken green area to indicate that that is a continuation of a bike lane and how cyclists should travel to get through generally an intersection or an other unclear area to end up in a bike lane. And examples of that actually occur somewhere around, I think it's Baum Boulevard and Negley, if I'm not mistaken. And they're basically to show how you should follow through, okay? All right, next slide. So again, these are all examples of infrastructure. One more thing is a contraflow lane you should be aware of. There are bike lanes that go contrary to the flow of traffic in some locations. Forbes Avenue, right beside the Cathedral of Learning, is an example of such an area. And so cyclists should always be aware of am I moving in the direction of the arrow of the bike lane? But motorists should also be aware that there are sometimes cases where bike lanes will be moving opposite to their travel, okay? Cyclists aren't doing anything wrong. That's the way they are supposed to be. Top right, I think thanks to Bill, the shared bike use pathways. One of these is outside near the yellow statue by Posvar Hall. And these are places where it's sort of all non-motorized vehicles, it's bikes or pedestrians. And this is where you have to rely on people to try to just watch out for each other. The bikes should stay on one side where it's marked for bikes, pedestrians should stay on the pedestrian side where it's marked for pedestrians. Everybody don't get angry, just sort of like, if you're coming up behind pedestrians, ring, ring, let people know you're going. And also, as far as markings with contraflow lanes and other things, if there's directional paint, okay, there will be indicators. There are a couple places in Pittsburgh, I'll warn you, that bike lanes come to unexpected ends without maybe a lot of warning, but generally some effort is made to indicate both to cyclists that you need to change position, but vehicles also will have to watch out for some of those markings where they cross vehicle spaces, such as the case at Baum and Negley. So, all right, next slide. So crashes. One of the things keep in mind is national crash data shows that there are a lot of conflicts, right? And conflicts occur when we have impacts between traffic, motorized, pedestrians, cyclists, et cetera. Most of these do occur during darker hours. It's something that at my own nonprofit, we work hard to raise visibility. For a cyclist, you have to have a front to ride after dusk. You have to have a front light and at a minimum, a reflector on the back. But I would strongly suggest if you don't have a light on the back of your bike, you are not going to be visible to road users. Road users, keep an eye out for cyclists. Oftentimes, if they are obeying the rules, but they only have that little reflector in the back, you may not be able to see them, okay? But in general, some of the data trends show that there are more cyclist collisions in urban areas than suburban areas, and that's generally rural and suburban, generally because of the population density and other factors, and there are more people there who are biking as well. Okay, just some Pennsylvania's crash stats: 1.71% traffic crashes involve bicyclists, and it's interesting. Those numbers will just kind of continue to move forward. We have to keep in mind to try to. That's why part of this training is important, so that you understand as a driver how to watch out for cyclists. Be cautious, be patient. Right, I think would be part of that. Next slide. And this is a really important thing. Just a quick thing. My father used to tell me is that, if you can avoid an accident, do it. It doesn't matter whether or not you're at fault, avoid that accident. So both cyclists and drivers are responsible for not only their own obeyance of the rules, but also being aware and watching out for the unexpected. Keep it making eye contact. If you're a cyclist, making eye contact with the driver who looks like they're about to turn left. Drivers, if you see a cyclist and it's too narrow and you can't pass with 4 feet, don't do it. Just wait, be patient, get to the next space. But in general, when you have a crash, both people could have done something different to avoid it, okay? So it's not just about being obstinate and saying, I'm following the rules, or they're following the rule, or they're not following the rules, but saying, look, if I can avoid a crash and potentially harming a neighbor or my community, let's just avoid that collision. So next slide. Okay, so watch out for these conditions. So one of the things to take a look for is sometimes a cyclist may be traveling the wrong way in an actual traffic situation. And so a vehicle, and that's one of the reasons that cyclists should always travel with traffic, right? You don't want to be on the wrong side of the road biking forward. And this is an important point to note that PennDOT and other walking and biking requirements suggest that pedestrians who have to walk on the street walk opposite to traffic, but it's always stated that cyclists should be biking with traffic on the same side, okay? And here's an example of a cyclist who's not. They're biking against traffic so that the road user, the vehicle will turn right, cross their path and potentially impact them and hit or kill them. So you watch out for these situations. Next slide. Yeah, and so the important point for how could you avoid this as a driver? You say, well, that person shouldn't be there, and I would agree that that person should not be there, but it doesn't mean that some people may make mistakes or they may be unaware. So do that extra caution to look left and look right at all driveways and intersections, even when they're one way and you know that there shouldn't be traffic, because I've seen my share of cyclists who are biking on one-way streets counter to the proper flow of traffic. It's wrong, but again, if we can avoid a traffic accident, we want to avoid the traffic accident. Next slide. Yes, and here's the fine example. I really like this picture when I found it. This illustrates why you do not want to ride the wrong direction in a bike lane. Okay, if this is not a contraflow lane, if this bike lane is supposed to be going away from our point of view, the cyclist should have been going the other way. So here's a motorist who's trying to enter the roadway and expecting traffic from the left, right, or from the car's point of view, okay, behind us as the viewer, starts to pull out and doesn't notice the cyclist going the wrong way. Okay, don't put yourself into that position as a cyclist, but drivers, be aware that inexperienced road users may make this mistake. Next slide. Again, I would also point, something I did want to mention about this specific scenario in a parking lot is that I had it when we were looking up some stats in my area of Shaler Township. I talked to the chief of police at the time and said, hey, look, give me the crash stats for all pedestrians and cyclists that you have on record. And when that was produced, the chief at the time, jokingly and friendly, he said, look, the most of these, occurred in Giant Eagle's parking lot. And we can conclude that Giant Eagle's parking lot is the most dangerous place to be. And the reality is that reflects the fact that we have lots of pedestrians, cyclists, and other users driving in an enclosed space with tight corners. So drivers always look, left and right. Cyclists ride on the correct side of the road. Do not actually, by riding in ways where cars don't expect you, you're putting yourself into harm's way. Okay. But vehicles, drivers, be aware that some people make mistakes. Try to be extra aware in any of these tight corner parking spaces. But generally, both of these vehicle users could have done something different to avoid this. And that usually is driving a little bit slower and being a little extra cautious and paying extra attention. So, next slide. So what could have been done differently? As I mentioned, the bicyclist should have been riding with the flow of traffic. That likely would have prevented that collision. Okay. But to motorists also, again, it's that extra prevention. Just look to the right, even when you don't think that you have to. Look both ways just to be sure, even if you don't expect traffic to be crossing. And we will avoid additional road interactions and conflict. Taking the lane, and this is my favorite because this is one of the things that I find most contested by motorists. And I'm going to hopefully explain to you why this is better for everybody, not only for cyclists, but also for you as a road user. Next slide. Okay. So first thing, actually, I apologize. My slide deck is out of sync on my end. Okay. So I'm sorry, my screen is so small. I can't see the markings. So the question here is this legal or not? And I believe we have somebody here who's entering the bike. Is that a turn? I apologize. I cannot see this now. Is that a turn box? Anna, you're shaking your head. Okay. So you may, this is something that will look weird to people, is that a cyclist will pull out into sort of in front of other traffic, get into that turn box and turn their bike a different direction. Be aware, watch out for this. That is in fact legal. They are designed for this. They work to help cyclists make left turns in complicated intersections. So if you see those green boxes floating out in the middle of nowhere, it's not somebody taking advantage of anything. It's designed for that type of use. So next slide. Yes, I'm sorry. I should have asked. That's fine. Yes, that is a legal maneuver. So why do we take the lane? Okay. And it's something that you've seen videos where car drivers said, get off the road, interactions, yelling. There are instances when cyclists have been fined for being in the middle of a road, incorrectly as it turned out, but it's something that is an important consideration. So it's often the safest place. You're visible, okay, riding in the middle of the lane or very slightly to the right of the middle of the lane makes you visible. It keeps cyclists operating as motor vehicles. It keeps you off sidewalks, which is sometimes illegal in business. It's illegal in districts in Pittsburgh, and it's usually unsafe because if you're riding on the sidewalk, you can't see cross traffic. Riding in the middle can prevent cars from trying to pass you when there's not enough space. So keep in mind, cyclists, if you ride very far on the front side of the road, it makes cars say, oh, there is enough room, I can squeeze by. And we do not want that to actually happen. So yeah, and also trigger light. We can get into that as well. But so lane position is important. Generally, cyclists are riding in the middle. You might see cyclists move to the left of the lane. And two reasons I usually see for that is they're going to go left, they're making a left turn soon, and they're getting in the lane position early, or to indicate that you should not pass them. I use that all the time. There's a very dangerous part of Mount Royal Boulevard where there's a hairpin turn. Cars will try to pass me, even though it's a blind corner, and it's very dangerous for them. And if they get hit, they're likely going to impact me. So I'll move to the left of the lane and that's me saying, don't pass me. I know there's something dangerous ahead. And if you try it, you're going to cause an accident. A little bit of insight there. So next one. So is this condition legal or not? We have two people riding on a street in the middle of a suburb area or a rural area. Notice they are two abreast, more or less, or they're slightly staggered stance. Is this a legal position for a bike to ride? have an interactive component. So the answer is yes, this is legal. Okay, so cyclists could be anywhere in that lane, two abreast. And that's something cars often won't see. These happen to be off to the side of the road. People can ride on the siding of a road if it's broad enough, but in general, cyclists should stay on the actual cartway because it's generally clear of gravel and other things. And that's another thing to keep in mind as a driver. Part of being a cyclist is you have two wheels and they're narrow. And so gravel and things like that, it can be a real problem if you're moving quickly. Also, there's glass and debris in there. And so cyclists could fall off, lose control of their bikes by riding in that condition. So it's better to stay on the road where it's typically cleaner. Okay. All right, next slide. And oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm stopped. Bill, you should have told me. This is my part to stop. I apologize. Bill's going to take over because I went 2 slides over. So
Hey, Chris, you were rolling, so it's all good. So these are
Thank
just
you.
a couple of additional scenarios that we'll kind of move through here just to reinforce kind of what Chris was going over. So again, this is just kind of going over why cyclists continue to take the lane. There may be debris on the shoulder. There may be a grate that you may want to avoid. The lanes may be too narrow to share. Again, being more visible for motorists. And then what we'll talk about next is avoiding, or we'll get to, is avoiding the door zone. Let's go ahead, Nick. So one thing that we encourage cyclists to essentially ride predictably, as Chris mentioned earlier. As this graphic illustrates, it really can be dangerous if you're going in and out of traffic or up onto the sidewalk. Once you exit the roadway, you as a vehicular driver may not be paying attention to them anymore because they're not on the roadway. And then suddenly the bike comes back into the lane and can create a conflict. So we always encourage riders to ride as straight as possible on the road. So we'll go to the next slide. And so you can see these two pictures here are sort of trying to illustrate a bit of a cycle lane that comes close to a line of parked vehicles. So on the left, you can see kind of an Outback parked along the white line there. And then on the picture on the right, you'll see a little bit of you'll see those double striped lines along the line of parked cars. That indicates a cycle lane. And if a driver were to open their door, that would create a conflict with the cyclists. So what we'll talk about next is how do you minimize that? So the best thing you can do as a bicyclist is one, know where the door zones are, try to avoid not riding close to them. And you as a driver, one of the best things you can do is actually to one, use your mirrors, even like a small tiny inset mirror on your door can kind of help you look along the side of your vehicle. Or what I like to do is if you can do it is kind of use your opposite hand to reach over and open the door. This naturally moves your body to kind of look for cyclists. And so this is a great maneuver to do so that when you open your door on a busy street, you're not hitting a cyclist that may be riding by. So let's take a look at another potential crash scenario. So here we have a green light with a cyclist heading straight through the intersection and then a motor vehicle that is turning left. This could be another potential conflict or crash point. So how do we avoid this type of incident? So Nick, next slide. So if there's no protected left with oncoming traffic as a motorist, slow down, stop and wait until all traffic clears, including cyclists. Watch for incoming cyclists as it can be difficult to judge speed of a cyclist coming towards you. And then watch for bicycles in the shadow of a vehicle. So what that means is that the bicyclist may be too close to the vehicle that is in front of them and they become a little bit obscured to traffic on the opposite side. So we always encourage cyclists to try and avoid that shadow area, and then vehicles, keep an eye out for cyclists that may be coming through as you're turning. Go ahead, Nick. So let's take a look at this scenario. We have, again, riders on the side, and then we have this white truck that is moving over to pass them. And the question is it legal or not? And if we advance. So again, in the state of Pennsylvania, it is legal to do this maneuver. Motor vehicles must allow 4 feet of distance when overtaking a cyclist. And it is the motorist's responsibility to provide this distance, not the cyclist's. And vehicles should travel at a careful and prudent speed. So when passing cyclists, here are some tips. Treat bicyclists as you would any other slow moving vehicle. Motorists are allowed to cross the double line if they're trying to get 4 feet of space. If there's oncoming traffic, wait, slow down for that to clear. And then finally, return to your lane when the bicyclist is in your rearview mirror. So another common scenario, which some of these bike boxes and things try to get around, but what you'll see here is a conflict point is called a right hook. So basically an overtaking motorist is trying to turn right as the cyclist is moving through the intersection. The result is that the cyclist could be hit by the car. So how do you avoid this scenario? So again, bicyclists may take the lane to avoid being right hooked by cars. Motorists should check their mirrors carefully to watch for cyclists approaching. And then finally, they should wait to avoid cyclists and turning right unless it's safe to do so. So make sure there's enough room for you to overtake a cyclist before you make that right-hand turn. Otherwise, let the cyclist clear the intersection, make the right-hand turn. So again, we have another passing scenario. This is the opposite. As you probably can guess, this is not legal. And we can advance to the next slides. So again, check for bicyclists riding in your blind spot. When driving a larger vehicle, be aware of your extra mirrors and the extra space you take up. And then also, if you're driving a large vehicle, be aware that driving by a cyclist can create a wind blast and can potentially knock them off balance. So this kind of last scenario here is if you see a group of cyclists on the road, often called a peloton. Again, the same principle applies. Pass them slowly, carefully with 4 feet. Sometimes it's encouraged to tap the horn to let them know that you're coming. And that allows riders to alert themselves in a group ride, whether or not traffic's coming or not. Oftentimes the rider at the back will notice the vehicle coming and say car coming, and then the cyclist will be aware of it and the car will kind of pass around. So these are just a couple of last few things to be aware of while you're driving. We always encourage everyone should not be a distracted driver. Be alert, especially this time of year with sun glare, depending on which way you're traveling, whether the sun's in your eyes going to or from your commute. Avoid parking in bike lanes to obstruct bicyclists. Pay special attention to children on bikes because they often may not be as skilled as a more mature rider, and so they may be, riding in a way that could bring them into conflict with you. And then the last two here, illegal courtesies. Basically, that means cyclists are encouraged not to encourage motor vehicles to give them courtesies that violate the law. So that would be maybe stopping in the middle of a road and waving a cyclist across. And cyclists are encouraged not to take those types. And then, as always, speed is, one of the #1 factors in traffic accidents. And so the slower you are on city streets, the more safer you will be. Everyone will be. So the last, 2 or 3 slides here before we wrap up is, we've talked a lot about motor vehicles. So what are cyclists who attend courses either through Bike Pittsburgh, through any of the other community groups around here? What are they taught, and how are bicyclists taught to ride? So this is a picture from a recent league cycling instructor seminar. But what you'll see here is essentially control your bike, take the lane when appropriate, follow all the rules, be visible and predictable, and then also, yield when changing lanes, and finally, choose the correct intersection positioning. So if you're turning right, maneuver yourself to the far right side of the lane. If you're turning left, maneuver yourself to the left. And then here we sort of illustrate the various hand signals that you may see a cyclist using. So the one on the far left indicates a left-hand turn. The one next to it is a right-hand turn. You can also use the one on the far right side. That's also acceptable. And then the one that's not that in the middle that I mentioned, that is like stopping or slowing. So the bicyclist is letting folks know behind them that they're slowing down. So just to recap this presentation, everyone wants to arrive at their destination safely. So continue to treat cyclists as drivers of vehicles, cooperate to avoid bike and car crashes, always exercise caution at intersections and driveways, and understand when and why cyclists take the lane. And be sure to maintain that 4-foot rule when passing. Again, all users want to arrive unharmed. And I'll hand it back over to Nick just for the final wrap-up slide here on some additional resources that you all can take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Bill and Chris. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so just want to highlight some resources for folks. So Bike Pittsburgh, who Anna is with, is the bike advocacy organization for the city. So besides advocacy, they also provide a lot of really great educational videos on their website that explain all sorts of behaviors and safety patterns and infrastructure for cyclists. So I would recommend checking those out if you're interested. They also have maps, bike lanes, as well as some information for drivers. If you are in the city, Healthy Ride is the city's bike share. It's a great service. They've got more than 100 stations and 700 or so bikes across the city. That's my background. If you are a University of Pittsburgh student, faculty, or staff member, you get Healthy Ride for free. Essentially, the first 30 minutes of every ride are free. So check out Healthy Ride at Pitt on the University of Pittsburgh's website for information about that. I work with Bike Pitt, which is the university's sort of biking brand. And we support the Pitt Bike Cave, which is a student-run outdoor DIY sort of educational bike shop. So you can stop in there with your bike and they can help you repair it or tune it up and teach you how to do that in the future so that you either don't need them or that you can just stop in and use their tools if you want. So they're open 3 days a week. Their website is, or their website lists all the hours as well as their Google Maps post. So I wanted to open up for questions. I don't know, Anna, if there are any questions, if you've seen any on social media or any on here on Zoom.
So far, there haven't been any questions that have come in, but I know a pretty common question is do people legally who are biking have to wear bright colors while they're biking?
Yeah, no, they don't legally have to, but it's recommended. I mean, we tell all of our cyclists in our classes to wear bright colors. Unfortunately, it is not required by law. I think as Bill and Chris covered, the only legal requirement for visibility are reflectors on the front and the back.
Thanks. And if anybody in this call has a question, either type it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself too.
I would also add, Nick, that it's generally advisable to have some sort of bell or signal device on your bike. In some municipalities, it may be required, but this is something that you can use to indicate to pedestrians if you're on a trail or to other cyclists that you may be overtaking that there is a rider behind them.
Yeah, and Bike Pittsburgh, we are here always to answer any questions that you may have. And we appreciate this session because, believe it or not, we all agree that sharing the road and getting to your destination safely is the goal. And we are here to help clear up any confusion.
One more thing I'd say is just, I think it's been said before, just be patient. Usually your interaction with the cyclist will be like less than 20 seconds long, less than 30 seconds long, right? And they're probably going to be out of your way very quickly, where you'll have an opportunity in a few seconds to safely pass them. It's not productive to honk a horn or to yell. That is definitely not a productive way to get somebody to change a behavior. And usually you'll end up zooming past them and probably forget about them in about a minute.
I have another question. Do people who bike have to have a license, a driver's license?
No, cyclists do not have to have a license. There's no license for a cyclist, license for a bike. No. Any other questions from folks joining us on Zoom?
I didn't see any coming in.
All
And
right. Well,
nothing on Facebook.
okay. Well, as my calendar just reminded me, it's 12:45. Got 15-minute warnings for some things. So thank you so much for those of you who are joining us on Zoom and those watching on Facebook. Appreciate you joining us. You can check out Bike to Campus Week this entire week. On Friday, we've got our big festival in Shenley Plaza from 12 to 4. We've got Healthy Ride there, so you can activate your account and activate your Healthy Ride benefit. We've got Adam Solar Rides, who will have electric bikes to test ride and demo in a short loop around Shenley Plaza. We've also got him bringing some accessories like bags and lights and locks that you can buy if you don't have those. We also have information on some local group rides and a station to register your bike. So I encourage you to come out, check it out. Hopefully the weather will be nice and not rainy. And thank you so much for watching.